Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt's origins. These scoop marks, flawlessly symmetrical, defy the very notion of manual labor. Carved into rose granite, a stone of immense hardness, they have baffled researchers for decades. Archaeologists offered a simple explanation: workers pounded the stone with harder rocks, a theory widely accepted. But then Grok, Elon Musk's AI, analyzed them, and the explanation collapsed. Grok measured thousands of these marks and found something hand tools simply cannot produce: machine-level precision, repeated identically across entire quarry walls, even in locations no human body could physically reach. It detected spiral patterns in the stone consistent with rotational cutting and identified trace materials at the base of the marks: diamond dust and crystalline aluminum oxide, substances that have no business being in a Bronze Age quarry. Grok cross-referenced every documented cutting method, ancient and modern, and the matches it found were all modern technologies. What it discovered carved into 3,500-year-old granite changes everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt and raises a question nobody in mainstream archaeology is willing or prepared to answer: the marks that shouldn't exist. The Aswan granite quarries, located in Upper Egypt some 800 kilometers south of Cairo, present one of the ancient world's most notorious mysteries. This is where ancient Egyptians sourced the hardest, most prized stone on earth, granite registering between 6 and 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, harder than most metal tools of the ancient world. The pyramids, the obelisks, the great temple columns, all originated here. Carved into the walls of the trenches, where workers freed these stones from the bedrock, lies something that has been sitting in plain sight for over a century: scoop marks. These marks are smooth, curved, uniform, and repeat in patterns so consistent they appear less like the result of ancient labor and more like the output of a machine running the same program repeatedly. The most famous site is the unfinished obelisk, a single granite monolith still embedded in the quarry floor, abandoned when cracks appeared in the stone before its removal. Completed, it would have weighed over 1,000 tons. The trench walls cut around it are lined with these marks, 15 to 20 centimeters wide, 5 to 10 centimeters deep, arcing in identical curves and overlapping at nearly the same interval. They create a wave-like surface texture that is remarkably smooth to the touch. It is not rough, not fractured, not the result of something being smashed repeatedly. For over a century, mainstream archaeology offered a straightforward answer: ancient workers knelt in the trenches, pounding the granite with harder dolerite stones, capable of pulverizing granite through repeated percussive impact. Experimental archaeologists demonstrated this method could shape granite, and the theory was accepted, the case considered closed. But here's the catch: when modern researchers actually attempt this, the marks they produce bear no resemblance to those at Aswan. Their impacts create rough, irregular pits with fractured edges and inconsistent depths. The shapes do not repeat, and the spacing varies wildly. Nothing about the experimental results matches what is found on the quarry walls. Furthermore, estimates of how long it would take to cut the trenches around the unfinished obelisk using this method run to decades of uninterrupted labor. The theory survived not because it fit the evidence, but because no one had the tools to systematically challenge it until 2024, when an AI was given those very tools. What Grok found next is the kind of evidence that simply doesn't make it into textbooks. The analysis began with a simple premise: provide Grok with high-resolution images of the Aswan quarry marks, instruct it to analyze every measurable feature without prior commitment to existing archaeological theories, and compare those features against a comprehensive database of ancient and modern cutting methods to determine what could actually have produced these marks. Grok ran the measurements, and the first result made no sense. Across thousands of individual scoop marks measured in large sections of the quarry, size variation between marks was less than 5%. Spacing variation between successive scoops was less than 3%. Every single arc matched the others as if produced by a tool with a fixed cutting radius, not the variable, unpredictable motion of a human arm swinging a stone. Entry angles were consistent regardless of position along the wall, which is functionally impossible if different workers were crouching and kneeling in different spots over a period of years. The AI flagged what it was seeing with a direct assessment: these characteristics are inconsistent with hand tool percussion, they are consistent with mechanically guided cutting, where tool position, speed, and pressure are controlled by a mechanism, not a human. Grok didn't hedge. It didn't suggest the dolerite theory was incomplete or needed refinement. It rejected the theory outright. The precision of these marks, the AI concluded, exceeded what unguided human labor produces, even with skilled workers and ideal conditions. What was carved into these walls required something that moved with mechanical consistency, something that didn't tire, didn't shift position, and didn't vary its arc based on the angle of a shoulder or the fatigue of a wrist. While primitive copper and bronze chisels have been found across ancient Egypt, Dr. Parkak, who has spent years using satellite imaging to locate hidden archaeological sites, reviewed Grok's initial findings. She later described the precision data as deeply uncomfortable, not wrong, not impossible, but uncomfortable. This discomfort arose because if Grok was right, the standard narrative she had been trained in, and had herself taught to students, was built on a foundation that did not fit the physical evidence. However, the precision of the marks was only the first problem Grok identified. The second problem was where some of them appeared, impossible locations. Grok didn't just measure the marks, it mapped them. Every documented scoop, every photographed surface, every section of trench wall recorded over a century of archaeological work was included. What it found in that mapping was, frankly, harder to explain than the precision data. Some scoop marks appear in locations that a human body cannot reach. Certain marks on trench walls continue beneath granite blocks that were never removed, meaning the cutting motion passed through spaces too confined for any worker to access, let alone swing a stone. Marks appear in tight interior corners where there is no physical room to position a body and generate enough force to pound effectively. Some marks run along nearly vertical surfaces at heights where a worker would need to be suspended midair while simultaneously maintaining the kind of controlled, consistent leverage that would produce uniform arcs. Here's what nobody wants to say aloud: a human being simply cannot occupy those positions. You cannot be in a corner 9 meters wide with no overhead clearance, swing a stone, and produce a perfectly consistent arc repeated dozens of times. The physics simply don't allow it. A mechanically guided tool moving independently of a human operator's body position, that matches the evidence exactly. A person doing this by hand, it does not match at all. Grok's geometric analysis of these locations produced a conclusion the AI stated plainly: the cutting tool, whatever it was, moved in continuous arcs independent of human body position constraints. That is the definition of a mechanically controlled cutting process. We don't know what that mechanism was. That is the part that should keep you up at night. Deep test pits scattered throughout the Aswan quarries are features that traditional archaeology has never been able to explain satisfactorily. These are deep, narrow, vertical shafts cut directly into solid granite, descending 9 to 15 meters into the bedrock with widths of only 0.9 to 1.2 meters. The official explanation is that they are exploratory shafts, test holes drilled to assess stone quality at depth before committing to a major extraction project. This revelation has a profound ripple effect, dismantling the notion that these structures were built solely with primitive technology and fundamentally altering our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. Here's the problem with that explanation: it's physically absurd. Picture yourself at the bottom of a shaft 12 meters deep and 1 meter wide. There is no room to swing a pounding stone. Granite dust and chips would accumulate around you, coating your lungs, destroying your visibility. Removing that debris would require hauling it up 12 meters by hand. You would need torchlight to see anything, meaning someone above you constantly managing fuel and flame. And even if you could somehow tolerate all of that, you still physically cannot generate the force needed to pound granite effectively in such a narrow space. And yet, the walls of these pits are smooth, consistent from top to bottom, showing the same clean scoop marks visible everywhere else in the quarry, with no degradation in quality as depth increases. In a hand-cut shaft, working conditions worsen as you descend, the marks should get rougher and more irregular. They don't. Grok ran the analysis on the pit's geometry and wall characteristics, and then it found something that stopped the research team cold. Some pits don't descend in straight lines. They curve. They bend. And they do so in ways that precisely follow the internal grain structure and mineral veins inside the granite, features that are completely invisible from the surface. You cannot see them, nor can you detect them by looking at the rock from above. Modern quarrying operations use seismic surveys and ground-penetrating radar to map these internal features before extraction begins. That technology is decades old, it did not exist in ancient Egypt. And yet, whoever cut these pits knew exactly where those features were. They were tracking the internal structure of the stone as they cut, adjusting course based on information that, as far as we understand ancient Egyptian technology, they should not have had access to. How? Grok didn't have an answer. Neither does anyone else. This is where the microscopic evidence gets genuinely unsettling. When Grok was given electron microscope images of the granite surfaces inside the scoop marks, not photographs, not high-resolution images, but actual microscopic imaging of the cut surfaces, it identified features that traditional archaeological examination had missed entirely for over a century. Grok ran the comparison, and the result pointed to technologies that should not exist in 3000 BCE. Inside many scoop marks, barely visible spiral patterns were detected in the stone surface. These are consistent with rotational cutting, a spinning tool moving through material, not percussive impact. A drill bit leaves spirals, a spinning milling head leaves spirals. A dolerite stone swung against a wall does not leave spirals, it leaves fracture patterns. These are fundamentally different signatures, and Grok flagged them immediately. Furthermore, at the base of some scoops, granite particles showed evidence of partial fusion, indicating localized melting of the stone during the cutting process. Cold percussion, stone on stone, does not generate heat sufficient to melt granite particles. High-speed friction or directed energy cutting does. And then there were the trace materials. Chemical analysis detected diamond dust and corundum, crystalline aluminum oxide, in the residue at the base of the marks. Both materials are used in modern industrial cutting and grinding operations because they are harder than granite and can abrade through it with precision. They are not naturally present in granite, which is composed of quartz, feldspar, and mica. Diamond dust and corundum had to be introduced from outside the stone during the cutting process. Grok compared all these signatures against its complete database of cutting methods. The closest matches were three modern technologies: water jet cutting, which uses ultra-high pressure water mixed with abrasive particles and produces smooth, uniform cuts with minimal heat; ultrasonic cutting, which combines high-frequency vibration with abrasive slurry and creates the specific microscopic surface patterns Grok detected; and diamond-tipped rotary cutting, which produces exactly the spiral groove pattern and consistent cutting radius found in the analysis. None of these technologies should exist in ancient Egypt. And yet, the physical evidence, the spirals, the fused particles, the trace materials, suggests something functionally equivalent was being used. Whatever that something was, here's what nobody in mainstream archaeology wants to confront: diamond dust and corundum don't just wander into a granite quarry on their own. Someone put them there. Someone knew that those materials, applied to a cutting tool, would cut harder, cleaner, and faster than anything else available. That knowledge, that specific, highly technical knowledge, is sitting at the bottom of scoop marks in a quarry that supposedly predates the civilization capable of developing it. Either the dating is wrong, or the technology is far older than we have acknowledged, or both. The quarry knows too much. When Grok mapped the locations of all the deep test pits across the full quarry layout and overlaid them with modern geological survey data, the result was immediate and impossible to dismiss. The pits aligned precisely with fault lines, mineral veins, and structural weaknesses in the granite, features confirmed by modern ground-penetrating radar. Not approximately, but precisely. The ancient workers hadn't guessed or used trial and error, they had drilled into exactly the right locations time after time with the accuracy of a modern geological survey. The overall quarry layout showed the same impossible knowledge. Trenches and extraction zones were positioned to minimize internal stress. Cutting patterns avoided fracture-inducing stress concentrations. A drill core from one of these granite holes, preserved in the Petrie Museum, is available for research analysis, offering a tangible piece of this enigma. The extraction followed the granite's natural crystal structure to reduce waste. Viewed from above, the entire operation resembles the output of computer-optimized quarry design. Accumulated craft knowledge does not explain knowing where a fault line runs 9 meters below the surface before cutting the first shaft. Something gave those quarry workers a map of the stone they were cutting. We don't know what. In the southern section of the Aswan quarries, there is a large depression in the bedrock. For over a century, archaeologists have interpreted it as an ancient harbor, a loading area where finished stones were placed onto boats for transport down the Nile. Grok looked at the depression's geometry and proposed something else entirely. The AI analyzed the dimensions, the shape, and the relationship between the depression and the surrounding quarry features, and its assessment was stark: this is not a harbor. This is the cavity left when an enormous single block of granite was removed, possibly the largest stone ever quarried by any civilization in recorded history. Based on the cavity's geometry, Grok estimated the missing block weighed between 3,000 and 5,000 tons. Let that sink in for a second. The Lateran obelisk, the largest known Egyptian obelisk now standing in Rome, weighs approximately 455 tons. The largest stone in the Great Pyramid weighs around 80 tons. A block of 3,000 tons minimum would be more than 6 times heavier than the most impressive obelisk Egypt ever raised. Moving something that size would require engineering capabilities so far beyond what we attribute to ancient Egypt that it's difficult to know where to begin. We have no confirmed record of it. No inscription credits it. No historical account describes it. And yet, a cavity the shape and volume of that block sits in the southern quarry, labeled on every map as a harbor, examined by generations of researchers who apparently never asked what left that hole in the ground. Where did that block go? How did they move it? And if they could move a 3,000-ton block, what else were they capable of that we simply haven't found yet? This is where the mystery becomes something else entirely: the timeline problem. In several locations throughout the Aswan quarries, ancient artwork appears painted directly on the granite surfaces. Simple red ochre drawings of birds, boats, and geometric symbols. This style of art appears across the Sahara and the Nile Valley and is typically dated to 4,000 to 6,000 years before the Common Era or earlier. The dynastic period of Egypt, the pharaohs, the pyramids, the civilization we associate with these quarries, didn't begin until approximately 3100 BCE. The red ochre paintings are older than dynastic Egypt, and some of those paintings appear on top of the precision scoop marks. For instance, drawings of ostriches, consistent with pre-dynastic art, are found directly on quarry walls, painted over the scoop marks. This suggests that people were making these paintings on already existing scoop marks even before dynastic Egyptian civilization began. The paint sits inside the grooves of the scoops, not under them, which means the scoops were already there when the paintings were made. Grok ran the timeline analysis. If the scoop marks predate artwork dated to 6,000 years ago or earlier, then the most sophisticated granite cutting at Aswan was happening before the pharaohs existed, before the pyramids, before the civilization we have always credited with these quarries had formed. Grok's degradation analysis made it worse. When the AI compared cutting precision across different sections of the quarry, sorting them by available dating evidence, hieroglyphic inscriptions, associated artifacts, tool mark signatures from known bronze and copper implements, it found a pattern that runs exactly backward from what you'd expect. The oldest work was the most precise. Later work got progressively cruder. In sections confidently attributed to dynastic Egyptian workers, the cutting is rough, inconsistent, and shows clear evidence of the percussion and abrasion techniques we associate with Bronze Age technology. That's what we'd expect, that fits the standard model. But in the oldest sections, the deepest, most ambitious extractions, the ones without hieroglyphic attribution, the cutting is cleaner, more mechanically consistent, and more precise than anything the Bronze Age should be capable of producing. Technology is supposed to improve over time. Knowledge accumulates. Techniques get refined. This is the foundational assumption of archaeological chronology. At Aswan, the evidence runs the other direction. The people who cut this stone first were better at it than the people who came later. Not marginally better, but categorically better, as if a master passed their tools to an apprentice who could never quite replicate the original work. Grok's conclusion was direct: the most advanced work in the Aswan quarries may not have been done by dynastic Egyptians at all. It may predate them by thousands of years, created by a culture whose identity, capabilities, and fate remain entirely unknown. What history got wrong? What Grok did here was not discover new sites or uncover hidden artifacts. Everything it analyzed had been documented for over a century: the scoop marks photographed, the test pits measured, the red ochre paintings catalogued, the southern depression labeled on every quarry map. What Grok did was process all of it simultaneously. Without a career to protect, without a peer review board to satisfy, without any institutional commitment to a narrative that needed defending, it held every piece of evidence in view at once and reported what it found. The unfinished work here offers invaluable insight into the potential function of these tools, hinting at an ancient, possibly lost, civilization's working methods. Human researchers, working inside frameworks built over generations, had never done that. They couldn't. The pressure to fit evidence into existing models is invisible until you see what analysis without it produces. Three possibilities emerge: either dynastic Egyptians possessed cutting technologies far more advanced than anything we've found in tombs, rare, eventually lost, surviving only in the marks they left, or the most sophisticated work at Aswan was done by a pre-dynastic culture from the Green Sahara period, whose capabilities later Egyptians inherited but could never replicate, or our chronology is simply wrong, and what we call the Old Kingdom is the declining remnant of a civilization whose peak is far older and far greater than anything in the current record. None of these possibilities are comfortable. All of them require dismantling assumptions that have defined Egyptology for over a century. Dr. Parkak, standing in that trench with her calipers, didn't have a framework for what she was measuring. Neither does anyone else who has looked at Grok's analysis without flinching. The scoop marks are real. The precision is measurable. The microscopic signatures are in the stone. The timeline runs backward. The question that should be keeping every Egyptologist awake right now is this: if the people who built the most enduring monuments in human history inherited their quarrying techniques from a civilization we know nothing about, how much of what we call ancient Egyptian achievement actually belongs to someone else entirely? As we continue to unravel the threads of forgotten civilizations and challenge established narratives on Lost Chronology, we invite you to explore these profound questions with us.